The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. We will start in just a moment. A little more housekeeping. Great. Igor, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. All right, all things being equal, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. Today we are talking about staying ahead of the curve with departmental solutions that fit your business needs. Business applications featuring Empowered and OBS, K2, and a discussion about both the platform and the approaches that our collective companies take with regards to enabling business solutions through both technology, through sound process, and through people. So a little bit of housekeeping. Today's format will be discussional with live demo of the K2 platform. I will try to keep my my talkativeness at the front of the thing down to a dull roar, just a little bit of positioning. We're going to target 45 minutes today as a maximum. We'll see how we go with that. And there will be the possibility for you to interact and ask questions, both with the demo as well as through the GoToWebinar questions facility. If you have any questions you'd like to park there, we'll take moments throughout the presentation and I'll pick those up and socialize those with the wider audience. And without further ado, we'll get started. If there are any critical technical issues anybody would like to raise, either park those in the questions area or if you have access to the chat facility, feel free to chat those through to us and we'll see what we can do. So first of all, a little bit of background. I work for a company called OBS. OBS has been in the Microsoft services space predominantly around Microsoft Dynamics CRM and Microsoft SharePoint for about 10 years in the Australian landscape. We have recently been acquired in the last 18 months by Empowered. Empowered is based out of Western Australia originally, established in '99 as a publicly listed company with offices around Australia, New Zealand, and also in Seattle. Collectively through acquisitions of Conducive, OBS, eSavvy in Sydney, and more recently New Zealand-based Intergen, we are now a unified company of over 800 employees, covering a very wide range of competencies and the entire Microsoft technology stack pretty much. If there's any confusion about our branding at the moment, it's because we're right in the middle of rebranding, so patience with us over the coming month or so as we roll ourselves into the Empowered brand, and there's more information to come about that very soon. Today I will speak both as Empowered and OBS, and of course we also have with us today Igor Jarosevich from K2, who's going to be running some demonstration and talking about the platform explicitly for us. So the journey to become a partnership between Empowered and K2 has been an interesting one. Ultimately, K2 has evolved over years from its origins in the workflow landscape, if you will, to become a full-fledged standalone applications platform that provides data management, that provides forms capability, reporting capability, and of course good old-fashioned workflow and business process automation. Collectively, the platform has evolved to a degree of sophistication that, in our estimation, makes it the enterprise class choice for any business solutions that need to transcend the entire enterprise or multiple line of business systems. On the soft side, Empired is a leading provider of business solutions based on Microsoft technologies, still centered very largely around the SharePoint, collaborative spaces, portals, business productivity, and of course the emerging story of cloud technologies and services. We are particularly known for our adaptive or agile approaches to projects, for the breadth of skills that we bring to a project, our focus on customer outcomes, and of course the culture that OBS in particular has become famous and awarded for over time. Together, we feel that Empired and K2 bring a very strong story to the marketplace with regards to people, process, and technology. So today we're going to be talking about applications, business applications, and we need to explore a little bit first about what those actually are. And we're going to be talking about platform approaches as opposed to other approaches to solving business problems. First of all, let's agree we work in increasingly competitive, constrained, and governed and savvy marketplaces. The impact of our spend and the cost of our mistakes, the cost of our inefficiencies is exponentially growing over time. And so there is a huge pressure on organizations to streamline, become more efficient, and also to maximize new opportunities by spending their energy in different ways. And of course, this represents a number of different trends, from consolidation of technology, sometimes changes to staffing models, and a number of other issues. When we talk about enabling business applications or business process automation specifically, the traditional approaches were often cumbersome, very slow to develop, expensive, developed through very waterfall techniques, and ultimately wind up introducing a lot of extra cost and risk. They're not as agile and they're not as fast-moving as platform approaches, because platforms get us to that 50-60% mark of what we're trying to achieve much more quickly, and they give us a standardized and interoperable way to do those things. So we've grown as a company and as a collection of companies very passionate about taking platform approaches to these business problems. And of course, we've all experienced the landscapes of Excel and Microsoft Access files that litter our environments. The bespoke applications, the custom code that has become difficult to manage and slow and cumbersome and doesn't operate well with other systems. These are not uncommon problems. A platform approach is about acknowledging that we need to redesign our landscapes at a higher level, and that we need to make an understanding of data and process and our core products and customer definitions at the heart of that process. So applications embody the use of software technology to drive efficient and consistent behavior within business functions when and where it's needed. The application in this context is not an iPhone app. It may be an iPhone app, but it's much more. It is a representation of the data, the forms, the reporting, the intelligence, the process management that go together to make that entire business process and to actualize our services and our product delivery to the marketplace ultimately, whether those are internal stakeholders or external stakeholders. So traditional methodologies for building particularly form and workflow applications are siloed. They tend to be done in complete isolation with each other. They create inconsistent user experiences because they've been done at different times using different technologies. They tend to silo or duplicate our information and our processes, and they tend to be very difficult to provide management visibility across the entirety of the business. Very common problems again. And of course, as any IT administrator will attest to, very difficult to govern and very time-consumptive to administer. What we wind up with are landscapes that are in fact the typical fragmentation that we see today. It's always been anecdotally true of things like Access applications or Excel applications. But of course, our form and workflow applications wind up doing the same thing if we do not follow certain principles. So as we begin to take a platform point of view to solving these problems, one of the first bit of analysis that we need to take a look at is a comparison of the total cost of ownership of certain approaches versus the return on investment. Taking a look at total cost of ownership first, given traditional approaches. We start with out-of-box. typically a lower cost of ownership, but the fit to our business requirements also tends to be less. Not necessarily low, but certainly much less than the flexibility provided on the other end of the spectrum in the form of customization or custom application development. In the middle, we have approaches that are based on platforms and third-party extension that deal with the concept of using configuration only and extension through third-party tools to accomplish most of what we need to do. And what we find is the total cost of ownership for those two approaches forms a sweet spot where we are achieving much more of our business needs, but without the burden of customization and without the limitations of staying strictly out of the box. And of course, that forms a tangential curve. Now, when we then switch and take a look at the return on investment that each of these approaches can yield for us, what we find again is a much clearer sweet spot for configuration and extension, while still addressing the precision the business needs with some precision. The return on investment based on the total cost of ownership and the manageability and the interoperability and the governance capability that we gain with a platform approach. The speed to market for our particular applications. We have a clear winner in terms of taking a platform approach that relies on configuration and extension rather than out-of-box capabilities or custom development to accomplish what we're trying to achieve. So with that background in play, we begin to look specifically at the K2 application. Now, I'd like to dispel a few myths, particularly for those customers who may be aware of some of the history of SharePoint and K2 and some of the other workflow products that may be out there. There may have been a time when K2 was merely a workflow engine and one that was largely geared towards operating in a SharePoint environment. It certainly plays very well with SharePoint and has been intrinsically designed to operate in that landscape. But let's be quite clear. K2 has evolved to be much, much more. It has moved beyond the realm of just workflow management in a SharePoint context to become an organizational business applications platform that provides data management and data extrapolation. It provides workflow. It provides forms building and rendering capabilities. It provides reporting capabilities. It brings all of the elements together that allow us to build robust business applications that, yes, might still be interacting with SharePoint data or representing themselves in SharePoint, but can go much further, can go out into the mobile landscape across devices and browsers, can interact with data coming to and from multiple line of business systems, and can aggregate data collection and reporting across each of those sources. Now with that, we're going to dive right over to Igor and give him an opportunity to begin presenting the K2 platform in a little bit more detail. Igor, I will go ahead and try to make this switch as smooth as possible, and we'll make you the presenter, and you'll let me know if you have any problems with this.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for the introduction. Just to check, you can see my screen okay that side?
I think we're good.
Good. Okay, excellent. All right. So what makes up the actual platform of K2? It's pretty much those elements that sit on the screen there. As you know, we traditionally come from the workflow space, but we don't even talk about workflow anymore. We talk about creating of business apps, and business apps need to actually have all of these components as part of them. If you look at the pie, pie diagram there at the bottom, you'll notice that even though people talk about workflow forms and reports, to us the biggest piece of that pie is actual data, and that's something quite near and dear to K2 is the interactivity of data and how we do that as well. So it's a very important part of all of that. So we talk about the forms as well. So K2's got a standalone forms technology. You can take this form technology and you can actually then go in and embed it into technologies like SharePoint. So that is a little screenshot of K2 Smart Forms sitting inside of SharePoint. The forms itself are made up of different little views, so you can see different components that make up of a form, and those can then be integrated into various line of business systems to be able to pull that data from those different backends. So in that example over there, you could be looking at a form sitting inside of SharePoint, but it's pulling all of that data from those different backend systems. the forms that you build as well, sorry, the slides are running a little bit ahead of me here. The slides that you, the forms that you build as well are then able to run on mobile devices. So just seamlessly you build a form once and then it'll be able to render on different mobile devices. The forms themselves are built on HTML technology, so we don't target specifically different types of mobile devices. We target the forms technology that run on those devices, the browser devices. So these will run on Androids and Apples and desktops and various different devices as well. The workflow product that sits behind that, we have we have actually quite a few different designers. These designers are actually targeted at the different types of persona that might be involved in building processes. So the one on the left over there would be a designer used for somebody that wants to be able to build processes inside of perhaps SharePoint or standalone workflow processes, but that's building more simplistic processes, maybe not looking to design the most complex ones. They can actually take advantage of that design environment. The other designer over here, this specific designer is the one on the right-hand side, is one again that's you can do much more complex processes inside there, and inside of that one you can actually start to do much more deeper, much more core line of business type of workflows. So at the same time, you can enable one part of your business to start to take advantage of building their sort of self-service processes, while another part starts to use the same platform to build more core line of business workflow processes that span across the entire organization. And in a single process, K2 doesn't really matter where it starts. It could start from an online form. It could start from another system. Throughout the life cycle of a process, it could interact with many different types of systems, many different types of people, whether they're internal or external, that can be involved with inside of the workflow process. Of course, being able to report against those processes is also very important. So K2 provides a number of different ways that you can report against K2. The first is that K2, all of its data gets exposed with security, obviously, that you can then go and use reporting tools that you already have today. So if you want to take advantage of reporting services or other third-party reporting tools, you're able to connect to K2 and use that to report against K2. But what you can also do is K2 provides reporting components as well that fit into our forms technology, so you can start to go ahead and build your own dashboards out of K2 as well. So this is an example of a K2 view flow. This is a little screenshot that shows where a process currently is, and you can track it visually throughout the life cycle of that specific process. And you'll see a version of that run live. So taking a little bit further, what we also do is give you the ability to expose that information inside of tools that people are quite familiar with. So I always joke with people about asking them what's the most powerful reporting tool in the world, and probably the answer for that is Excel, because it's the one that most people know how to use. So we can even connect Excel spreadsheets into K2, pull in the data into Excel, and then allow the business to do their own pivots and charts and be able to analyze and interact with that information. So when it comes to the way that you interact with data from inside of K2, the traditional approach is normally, go and connect, go and drag and drop connectors or write code, and people are talking about web services and REST services and OData and all of these sort of technologies. What that actually does is it means that you can have your forms and your workflows, and you're going to have all of this connected to those various different systems. What that means is that there's going to be code sitting all over the place. You're going to have people writing code from the front end, people writing code from the workflow side of things, and that becomes very difficult to manage. And it also means you have to have different skill sets all over the place. So you're going to have a development skill set sitting at the forms layer, being able to build forms, because you want to be able to connect those to back-end systems, as well as sitting in the back-end. So K2's approach to that is slightly different. What we have is a concept of a technology called the K2 Smart Objects. What this means is that we can define business entities, and we can have these business entities pull their data from various different backends, so that when we interact with those business entities, we don't have to worry about the technology anymore. So in this example over here, if I'm building a form to do with a custom and an order, I simply talk about custom and order. And the same goes for when I build my processes or even my reports against that. Behind those smart objects, we then have a connector framework for you to go and connect those to where the data repository needs to be. So for example, whether it be SharePoint on-premise, on the cloud, or SQL databases, or SAP, or even custom ones that you might need to interact with, that gets done at the technical layer rather than the layer which is really there for creating the business applications. So what it does do is it does give us a much more solution approach to the solution approach to the applications that we are building. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just go into a bit of demo mode, where I'm going to take you through a couple examples. The first being an end-to-end sort of business process to do with employee onboarding. So this is an example. What you're looking at now is an example of a K2 smart form. So this form that you're looking at is comprised of 4 views. So I've got a view that is my header. I've got a view over here that shows me a list of my applications. So every time I create a new demo or new application, I publish it, and it appears in this little list here that you can search. There's another little view of any tasks. So you can see I've got some line manager approvals to do and some financial processing. These are workflow tasks that I now need to perform. The last little view that I've got on the screen is a little tracker so that I can go and track workflows that I've kicked off and be able to visualize and get an idea of where they currently are within their representative processes. So let's go and kick off one and have a look at how that looks. Also, just I should clarify that what you're looking at here is a pure K2 smart form running completely independently. You can also take these forms and put them into SharePoint. So as an example, if you look at this little view here of my apps, I've got a list of my applications over here. I'm just going to open up inside of SharePoint over here. So this is a view of SharePoint, and what you can see sitting inside of SharePoint is also that same list of apps, except this time I'm using tabs to show the process tracking and my list of apps, and you can see the theming and the styling of it. We can then go and mirror what it looks like inside of SharePoint. So you could decide where you want to put those forms. You can build a form once and actually host it in both SharePoint on-premise, SharePoint online, and even maybe on its own standalone environment if you want to as well. Okay, so let's go and kick our little process off. So the one that I'm going to do here is that of an employee onboarding process. So opening that up has now opened up another K2 smart form. This little smart form here has got lots of different tabs where I can go and add different sections of information, and I need to fill in details of an employee that we're going to onboard. So what I've done on this particular form is I've given you the ability to fill in a form partially and be able to save it as a draft. Quite often when you talk about online forms, especially very big ones, you want to be able to save something and come back to it. Maybe you want to complete something tomorrow and be able to really spend a lot more time on them. So in this example here, I've got a little save button that's opened up a little sub form. I'm going to go and load my John Leeds up and open him up, and that's now populated his information onto this form where I can then go ahead and continue. So on the smart form, I'm filling in a couple of details about Mr. John Leeds. A couple of details over here. What I can do is, you'll notice that there's simple little things. For example, if I change his department to IT, his role has now given me some different options. If I go in and I choose him as maybe in marketing, again, it's loading up those different fields. And those could be coming from any other backend data source. It could be a SharePoint list, or it could be anything really. As I go to other tabs over here, I can go and specify, what sort of systems we want to give them access to. So it's showing a little bit of, adding little checkboxes, other information. On my equipment and facilities tab over here, you can see there's quite a few options inside here as well. One of the ones that I quite like is this ordering of new IT hardware. If I go ahead here and I say yes, what you'll notice is the little purchase order section has opened up. And that now gives me the ability to go and add further line items. So I can now go and add a bunch of line items over here. So this new employee, we need to get them a monitor, and we also need to get them perhaps a laptop computer. And what I'm doing is I'm adding up these items, I'm getting a total, and this employee onboarding process, because I've added purchase order items that we need as well, could automatically start a PO process in parallel. So we could have the employee onboarding process kicking off and a PO process kicking off, so that when that employee starts on the first day, they're going to have all their HR stuff all done, but they're also going to have their new shiny laptop on their desk ready for them to start working from day one, rather than them spending the first week waiting for certain equipment to be completed and getting all that stuff in gear. Okay. All right, so let's go and kick this off and have a look at a couple of steps into this process. So I'm going to submit this process off. So that's giving me a little confirmation that John Leeds' process has been submitted. And if you go back to my main little screen over here, what we'll see here is under my tracking that I've got now a John Leeds process that is currently in the provisioning stage. Now what I can do there is I can actually click on that, open up a little bit of a reporting view of what's going on, so I can see a little summary of what's taking place. I've also included on this little view over here, and this is a view that I've built myself, so it shows you an example of, I decided I want a little summary. I also wanted a little view of who's doing what in this process currently and who has done what. So at the moment I can see there's actually 4 tasks that have been spawned off. If you notice, there's 2 tasks for human resources and 2 tasks for IT. What's happened there is for the IT authorization, it's gone to Brandon, but for demo purposes, I've also sent it to myself as well. For the HR task, it's actually gone to the human resources group, but it's also gone to me as well for demo purposes. So, sending it to individuals or to groups as well as including others inside of there. And I can see that currently all of those are active. From here as well, I can go into something called the K2 view flow. And what this is going to do is give me a visual representation of the workflow process as it currently is. So we can see that process has started off. It's gone through and provisioned some AD accounts and emails. It's done some back-end system integration taking place over there. And it's gone through to send to 4 tasks that have happened in parallel. So these are now showing you how a process can, one form being filled in has now spawned off, and it's gone to these 4 people in parallel. Instead of a paper form going to the first person and the second person, this is going to speed things up quite a bit. The facilities and security have completed their work, and we're now currently waiting for the human resources team and the IT team to complete their work. And if you notice IT, while this process is going on, IT could actually reject it. It could go for review, and then it could be rejected, and please add them, and then it goes for review, and it can kind of follow this little cycle independently of what the work that the HR team has to do. These processes can also go into sub-workflows. So if I open this particular one up over here, I can drill down into that particular one, and you can see that the security process has got its own independent security check that takes place, and we can have a look at that. All right. So I'm just going to open this up on another little tab, so we can watch our process move through its stages as we go along. Right. So now sitting inside of my task list, I've got 2 tasks. So if you remember, both the IT and the human resource task came to me, that appear on my task list. But I'm going to show you something that's quite unique about the way K2 does things, is that if I go into the IT task, so let's click through into that. So that has opened up the form that I now need to complete. So as somebody in IT, what you'll notice is I don't see any of the employee data as such as the salary information. I'm just getting a basic summary of the employee, and I can see any review status. So if I've rejected this a few times, I'll see the status of all of those and all the resubmissions sitting inside here, and I can make a decision. I can go along to the tabs, and I can have a look at the systems that have been requested, and if there's been any other information that's been attached, maybe some documents or whatever that might be, I can go and review that and then make a decision on that. So on this one, I'm going to approve it and say all good. Right, so I'm going to submit that particular one off. What you'll notice is my HR task has been removed, and I'm only left with my IT task has been removed, and I'm only left with my HR task. Inside of my workflow diagram, if I give that a quick refresh, I just did it there, you'll notice that that's now completed. So this particular step here is again waiting. It will not continue until I've had that human resource step completed as well. So let's go ahead and do that one. So if I go into the HR step, let's open that particular form up. Now what you'll notice is how different this form is. So if you remember, the IT one had those tabs. In this example, and in my fictitious company, the HR team are of a bit of a different culture. They don't like working with tabs, and they also have more sensitive data on the screen at any point in time. So instead of having that data blaring out for anyone to walk past and have a look at, what we've done for them is we've included these into these little collapsible sections. So they could open up the employee details, verify that it's John Leeds that we're busy dealing with, close that section, then open up the employee role details, and verify the salary information that's sitting inside there, and the role descriptions, and who the managers is, and that sort of stuff. You'll notice that everything is also read-only at this point in time. They can then close that and get on with working on the form. So again, we can present the data, can be filled in one big form, but then we can break it up and send it to different forms to different people with just the information that's relevant for them to have a look at. And not only is IT just needing to do some things in here, they can also now contribute to this to include maybe a K2 training that that employee needs to go on, give them a bit of a start date and an end date. And if I go and choose some date in the past, you'll see that validation is coming in and letting me know, well, you can't put somebody on training before their start date. So just things to help you not make mistakes when bringing people on board. So I'll add a little bit of training for them, and I'll go ahead and specify that I'm all done with this particular step and complete that step in my process. All right. So all my tasks have been completed. My workflow process over here is going to go through and complete its own work, its final steps. If I go and look at my little view pro process over there, just in time, hopefully you saw the refresh take place there. That process is now fully completed. I can then go into those processes and I can start to get an idea around the reporting of them and start to analyze maybe this particular workflow, get an idea of the bottlenecks that might have been within inside of the process. So for this one over here, I can see the HR step that took the longest to complete. And of course, I can run these reports against all my processes. So let's have a look at another example just very quickly. The other example I've got here is that of expense claims. So if I open up a particular claim over here, I can go and have a look at the details of claims that I've kicked off, and I can go ahead and submit a new claim. So opening that up is a little workflow process, so it saves it as a draft, and I can fill in the details of an expense claim. So you're now adding up all the little line items and that. So I'm not going to run through this one right now. I just want to show you one little step that can happen where you can start to bring reports, not only looking at reports at the end of a process and as an output, but using them within a process. So I've got a line manager approval to do over here as a task. So if I open this particular line manager approval, so this is going to open up. It's going to show me the details of who submitted the expense claim. And what I'm also doing is I'm pulling it through a little report here that is showing me over the months of that particular person what is their trend looking like with the expense claims. And maybe pull in other people that are part of their team and overlay that. And it's just showing a little example of just how you can start to bring reporting information using the tools within inside of K2 to help people make better decisions along route rather than just at the end of the process. Okay, so that was just a quick demonstration then on giving you an idea of a bit of an end-to-end scenario of a workflow process. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you just a little bit, I want to do something a little bit fun here. I'm going to just create you a little form that you could probably interact with just to show you what it's like to interact with what it's like to actually build one of these K2 smart forms. Okay, so what I've got over here is I've got my designer open. And inside of my environment, I have got what we call a K2 smart object. So if you remember, a smart object is that thing that we define on the data. So if we have a look at this little smart object that I've got, it's called event questions, and it takes in a first name, last name, mobile, a question and answer, and a couple of details that sit inside here. So that is, again, a K2 smart object. In my example of here, that smart object is actually backed against an Office 365 list. So what I'm going to do here is build a form against an Office 365 list. But when I build this, I don't have to worry about what the backend repository is. What I do now, the way that K2 Smart Forms works, is that you first build a visualization of the data. What do we want that to look like? So let's go ahead and build one of those. I'm going to design a new little view here. This is going to be called my event question view. So here's my little design environment, and I've got lots of controls that I can use now to go and build out this particular form. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to auto-generate one. I want your first name, your last name, your mobile, and what your question is. I'll do the answer, maybe bring in your email as well, and let's add that onto the form. Okay, now I can go ahead and I can make small changes to it. So for example, one of the things that I want to do is the ability for you to create that new item. So I'm going to add that inside there. Let's put that to the right-hand side. And I'm going to rename this to save. Also, first name, your question's a bit squashed up over there, so I'm going to just put a little space at the bottom here, put the question down below, and make it merge across the screen, and let's put your email back up at the top over there. All right? So just a nice little basic example with a few little details sitting on side there. Now when you hit the save button, well, it's already got the rule wired up, which happens automatically to save that item away. But before it saves it, I want to do some validation. So I'm going to add a validation rule inside here. Let's move that up. The validation rule, well, you know what? For this demo, I actually need everything. So I need you to give me all of those sort of details for this to pass its validation, and then it'll go and actually create that item. And then once it has created that item, what I want to do then as well is be able to allow you to go ahead and create another item. So I'm going to go and clear up some of the fields on the form. So clear up the ID and clear up the question, but leave the mobile and all your other details. You don't have to go and type that in all over again. So that's one of the things that I'm going to do. And then why not give you a confirmation message? So let's do a little show a message. And I'm going to say here, question is my title, sent, and I'll say thanks for the question. All right. So that's my little view, and it's sort of interactivity with this information sitting in there. So I'm going to save that away and check it in. Now I've got a little form that I can put my view on. So I've created a form a little bit earlier. So this is my little form. The only thing that I've got on this form at the moment is just a little header. Now what I'm able to do is take the questions view and just simply drop that into the page over there as well, and make that maybe non-collapsible. Okay, so that's the basic little header that I've got inside here with my questions sitting inside here. So I'm going to finish that off, check that in, and then go ahead and have a look at what that form now looks like. So there's a nice little Casey Smart form where I've got the field. If I try and hit save, you can see it's telling me those specific fields are required. And what I could also do is just to make sure that I get the right email address as another example of further validation that I can do. I can go ahead and do things like pattern matching. So on the email, for example, over here, I can put a little pattern and say that's the sort of pattern that I need an email address to be placed in. Okay, so that little form that I have now, if you would like to go ahead and try and access that, Garrett, if you could perhaps just publish the URL for that form on the
Yes,
list,
we've just put that into the chat window.
And, okay, brilliant. Right, so while you are accessing that form, what we've also got here is I've created previously, just for the time that I've got, is a little answer dashboard. So I've got a little form over here that gives me the ability to answer questions. So it's going to show a list of the questions that have been asked. I can click on them, and it's going to then show me the answer that's going to take place. Now what I want to do is I want to enhance this slightly, just to show you again a little change that I'm going to make over here. When I update the answer, I'm going to go and extend the rule that I've got onto that. So at the moment, all I'm doing is updating the answer over here. What I'm going to extend that with is the ability to go and send off an actual text message of that answer to you. So here I go and I talk to another smart object. So again, if you remember, smart objects are that back-end repository connectivity. So here I don't care what's connected to it. All I know that I want to do is go and use under my tools over here. I've got a little smart object to do with sending out text messages. So I'm going to go and say, well, what I want to do here is to send out a text message. I'm going to configure that. So the mobile number, well, I'm going to go and get from the question the mobile number. And I'm going to say your question was the question. And then I'm going to go and add into that maybe a little dash, answer, dash, and put the answer of whatever it is that I type in on the form. My mouse is a little bit sticky on this. Let's put the answer inside here. Okay, hopefully I've got that right. And let's submit that off. So let me check that in. So if I go now and have a look at my little questions answers, and I give that a refresh, wow. So these are all the questions that that you guys have started sending in. So will Tony Abbott survive? So if I open that particular question up, I'm just going to say no idea and submit that off. And then whoever it is that asks that question, you should receive that answer, and you can see the little question answer panel updating. Yep, is this an HTML form? Yes, it is. So K2 does generate HTML5 forms, just like that. What I'd also suggest some of you guys do is open up that form on a mobile device, and you'll see that it looks quite different. You'll see that it'll have changed the way that it'll have rendered differently. It'll change the layout, and it'll be able to change the whole thing quite nicely for you. So the other question I've got here, initial demo had nice branded styling. How long would you say take to define? So the styling that was in that demo was out of the box. It's a new theme that we're busy launching, but otherwise you can style it using CSS, which is also out of the box styling that sits inside there. So any of these forms, they've got themes. You can go and apply your own theme to it, or you can take one of our themes and then modify it in its standard CSS, and then obviously all your forms will pick up that change. Okay. And the last one, I'll just put a little thanks on that particular one. So if you want, now what you'll notice is, I've been answering some of these questions, using this little form that we created. All right. What's actually sitting behind that form? If I now go into my Office 365 environment, if you remember, the smart object that I used was backed up on Office 365. So I'm now logged into my Office 365 environment. If I go into my playground, and I've got my event questions list over here, and if I open that up, what you'll notice is there's all those questions that have been coming through sitting in a backend Office 365 list. So even though, and that's the whole thing about the way K2 works, is it doesn't really matter where the data is. If you want the data on-premise or in a CRM system or in Office 365, the data can remain where it needs to be, and then you can build your own forms and workflows, and anything that you need on top of those smart objects would sit on top of that data. Okay, so I'm going to switch back now and let Garant summarize some of the details.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Igor. I think that went really well. The technology gods are working with us today. And I'll go ahead.
I'm doing a live demo like that.
I will go ahead and steal presentation back from you.
There you go.
Excellent. So thank you again for that demo. I guess there's a few things that immediately come to the surface for me watching that again. First of all, when we talk about typical form and workflow solutions or applications, and we look at onboarding, we look at certain kinds of document or transaction approval, one of the things we often run into is that there can be quite a few drop-down boxes in our forms that we need to populate from external systems rather than replicating that data. And what I'm seeing here is a set of tools that really helps us manage that. As well, we run into cases where the business logic that we want in our workflow needs to do things like, for example, look up a delegation of authority in order to determine who the best party is to make that decision. And of course, that can be a cumbersome job if we're doing that by hand or through custom work. Here again, the data tools really come to the surface. At the risk of soapboxing, I see the great strength of the engine as having changed its focus from workflow to data. Now, I'd like to share some principles, but this is the part where we give away some free wisdom here. OBS, Empired, and K2 collectively have, over the years, done quite a few application configuration projects. There are some key principles that we've gleaned over time that can really set your project up the right way. The first have to do with how you approach data, and I think we've drawn an underscore over, under this point, that approaching your data rather than leaving it to be dealt with incrementally throughout your project is critical. Don't assume that you can clean your data up or understand it as you go along. It is worth its weight in gold to take a real holistic look at your data landscape, whether you have enterprise data management practices in place or not, and to begin to understand the health of your data. You need to understand the source of truth for key data elements, and you need to have business ownership over those data elements. Likewise, the ultimate goal is to have current, accurate, and consistently formatted data for your end users to experience when they hit those forms and those business processes. It's absolutely critical that those consistencies are bred out of the problem up front rather than incrementally. Visibility across multiple business processes. It is very important, particularly when you're populating things like drop-downs, not to replicate that data. You're increasing your management overhead. You're introducing risk in the form of data entry error and error within your data itself from an analysis standpoint. When you can standardize using smart data objects and apply those universally across a set of processes or applications, you're beginning to resolve this problem. And ultimately, back at your source systems or via the tools that you can layer on top of those source systems using this kind of technology to provide new data entry interfaces, we need to allow business to be able to update that data readily. We must get past the days of the story where the customer updates their address with us on a website and it takes 2 weeks, for example, to update 80% of the systems. Those days are gone. We need to be able to have staff enter data in one place and have it propagate out to others. These are the kinds of things that this toolkit can enable. If we move on to workflow, there are some very similar principles involved. We want to not replicate pieces of workflow or business logic. We need standardized process models wherever possible, despite the temptation to seek platforms and approaches that will satisfy every whim and nuance of every part of your business as to how they think they need to conduct themselves. It's important to try and achieve a consolidation and a standardization where possible. That being said, the toolkit needs to be able to allow you the flexibility to deviate when there is a clear business demand to do so. Very, very important point, terminology. Not just in how you frame your project and how you discuss your project or the business problem or the business process, but how that terminology reflects itself on the forms themselves. So when we name sections, when we name fields, when we name buttons, we need to ensure that across all the forms and solutions that we are going to build, that we are applying consistent terminology from the end user's perspective. Good layout, design, a minimalist branding approach, consistent terminology ultimately do one thing: they minimize user friction. They allow the user to come into these forms, in some cases with no training whatsoever, because it is so intuitive to use them. And this is a design principle that is absolutely imperative that you bring into your projects. And of course, package and bundle repeated activities. Don't reinvent the wheel. With forms, once again, consistent design and branding. Assist users with natural input flow. Now what we mean by this used to be called tab flow. Don't just throw the fields on the form, and don't just group them according to your business classifications. Do some testing and have a think about the business process itself and the way people are going to interact entering this data or reading this data, especially out in the field when their circumstances may be constrained. We need to think about the easiest way to get that data in for the end user and put them at the center of our universe. We also have an opportunity in some form designs and some application designs to have the approvers do their work to review and approve within the form itself. So rather than directing them to a task or sending them an email notification or directing them to a separate screen or separate system to conduct that approval, there's an opportunity with tools like this to embed it directly in the form so that they are operating their task, they are conducting their approval right within the context of where the data was created in the first place. And this is a very positive user experience. Now, that's not to say that we can't direct notifications, that we can't send alerts, that we can't run escalations through email. It is a very good design practice, however, to not assume that every possible notification needs to be sent as an email. If you are considering dozens and dozens of business applications involving the same set of people, over time, a default to email notifications is going to spam them to death, and they're not going to get read, and they're not going to drive action. Instead, we need to take a minimalist approach, and we also need to create ways to encourage the user to come to the interfaces where we want them to operate on a daily basis. Lastly, we must design for the usage channel. We need tool sets that allow us to either dynamically or specifically through static design develop experiences for the type and environment that users are going to interact with them in. It's not enough to just say we need responsive forms. We need to test the design of those forms to ensure that they are working. In extreme examples where we have roughnecks out on the high seas, their hands covered in oil, slamming their palms down on the tablets that have been hardened, we need to know that the form's still going to do its job. That's a bit of an extreme example, but there we go. Lastly, in approaching all of our projects, whether they be software development, platform-based configuration, we've identified some key success factors that will help you along your way. First and foremost, we need to always keep our focus on the customer or the end user and on our business outcomes. We cannot get caught up in the glory of the technology, the detail of the planning. We need the user experience to be our first and foremost concern. Second of all, we need to embrace uncertainty and we need to act incrementally. Change will happen. Your business requirements will change. You will learn more as you go. And taking adaptive or agile approaches to that project are going to help you deal with that uncertainty, and they're going to help you also deal with fixed time frames and budgets when those are the types of constraints you're working with. Importantly, we need to involve the end customer in our process, and we need to do it early. Do not wait and develop black box solutions and then reveal them. Bring the customer iteratively into that process and let them provide feedback early. Work in this cyclical way, and you will be able to produce working product that is pre-qualified, that is working better, meeting minimum viable product requirements earlier. Yielding usable value at every point is about creating separability in this iterative process. And you can use whatever system or methodology works for you. Maybe you're into Kanban, maybe you're into Scrum, but take a very hard look at what Agile principles can do for you. Not so much the methodologies, but the principles. Also, we need to encourage shared risk and self-enablement. It's no good for you to wind up with a solution that you don't know how to use, you don't know how to grow, and you don't know how to administer. And it's no good for the vendor or the customer to go through a process of developing that application in a way that there has not been shared interest in the outcomes, and that means sharing risk. And ultimately, we wind up reserving our resources for the important stuff. Don't spend your money on detailed design documents unless it's appropriate to do so. Instead, build something, put it in front of users, test it out. Lastly, communicate. Communicate and collaborate together. So, in closing today, I'd like to thank Igor from K2 for showing us the platform at a high level. As these things go, we are all available infinitely to answer your questions and even to provide context-sensitive demos to your organization. We're very excited to be partnered with K2 at this point, and it's going to be playing a heavy role in how we go to market for large-scale business solutions. We would like to thank you for your time today. We would like to invite you to contact us for any of those requirements, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for attending.
There's just a couple questions that we can just notice on the question panel, see how many there are. There's just one at the moment that's unanswered. There was a question about can the K2 Smart Objects be accessible from outside of the K2 platform, for example, via web services? The answer to that is yes, they can. You can access them via web services, REST, OData, WCF endpoints, or even to .NET Code if you want to. And I had a few other questions on the question panel. Sorry, there's a little form. So I've answered all of those, and you should receive them all back as text message replies. So again, thanks for your attendance today.
Thank you again, everybody, and we look forward to hearing from you.